Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters with me, Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's show, 2 million Muslims converge on Mecca for the annual Hajj pilgrimage. This at a time when the region is embroiled in its worst ever political crisis. August saw progress for women's legal protections in the Arab world. Lebanon and Jordan scrapped a law under which a rapist could be exempt from punishment if he married his victim. Plus, swapping meat for mushrooms in Syria. An NGO may have found the answer to alternative nutrition in the war-torn country, which is facing food shortages. But first to Saudi Arabia, which has seen the arrival of some 2 million Muslims from around the world for the start of the annual Hajj pilgrimage. That's this week. Among them, Shia worshippers from Iran who stayed away from Mecca last year following a stampede that killed 464 of their countrymen. Qataris are also heading to Islam's holiest site, despite a political crisis involving Doha and a Riyadh-led coalition. Alison Sargent takes a look at a pilgrimage entangled in politics.
It's one of the 5 pillars of the Islamic faith, and millions of pilgrims from around the world are gathering in Mecca to mark it. Every Muslim must complete the Hajj at least once in a lifetime if they have the means to do so.
We're very happy that we were able to reach Holy Mecca to do the Hajj, which is obligatory for every Muslim. We're very happy with the atmosphere here.
It's great. I may be in a wheelchair, but I feel very happy to be here for the first time.
The excitement is tempered by concerns over security. Just 2 years ago, a stampede during the Hajj killed more than 2,000 pilgrims. Several hundred of the dead were from Iran. The tragedy sparked a wave of protests and led Tehran to boycott last year's pilgrimage, instead holding commemorations at home. Iranian pilgrims are returning this year, and Saudi authorities say they're prepared to ensure public safety. The National Emergency Call Center has boosted its regular number of employees, while the Red Crescent will have over 2,000 members working around the clock.
We have around 100 temporary first aid centers in the area where pilgrims will be, and we have 4 helicopters and more than 300 ambulances. We're ready to work 24/7, and we have an emergency center that responds quickly to calls in many languages.
Muslims from Qatar have also been arriving in the Holy City after Saudi Arabia reopened its border crossing for pilgrims. Riyadh and its Arab allies closed air, sea, and land links with Doha in June, after accusing it of supporting terrorism and being too close to Iran. The rift sparked the region's worst diplomatic crisis in years, and the reopening of the border is being seen as a breakthrough. Although Qatar says it sent only dozens of its citizens to Mecca this year, far fewer than the 12,000 Qataris who made the pilgrimage last September.
Over the weekend, Lebanese authorities located remains believed to belong to soldiers kidnapped by the Islamic State group back in 2014. The discovery came just hours after a ceasefire took effect on the Syria-Lebanon border, an area that has seen a weeks-long offensive against the extremist fighters. Carl Brown brings you the story.
Mourners throw rice and flowers to pay their respects to Lebanese soldiers killed fighting the so-called Islamic State. On Sunday, military vehicles and Red Cross ambulances brought back to the city of Laboué the remains of several Lebanese soldiers who were kidnapped by militants in 2014. For several grieving families, it was confirmation that their loved ones were dead. The mother and sister of Mustafa Webe were inconsolable.
We celebrate his martyrdom, and we are all with him on his way. May God save the army and its leadership and all my brothers.
30 Lebanese soldiers and police were kidnapped by the so-called Islamic State when militants overran the border town of Arsul in northeast Lebanon 3 years ago. They had been held captive ever since. Now, after a week of fierce fighting, the discovery of the Lebanese troops paved the way to Sunday's ceasefire.
Once it was confirmed that those soldiers, 8 of them, had been beheaded or assassinated or killed by the terrorists after an extended or a long period of detention, they've decided that this is effectively the signal to terminate the military action and call for a ceasefire.
Hezbollah and the Syrian army also declared a ceasefire in their own attack against the extremists in Syria's western Kalamoun region. Lebanese authorities will now conduct DNA tests to identify the dead.
In Lebanon, Parliament voted this month to abolish a law that allowed rapists to evade punishment by marrying their accusers. The move comes after other nations in the region, namely Jordan and Tunisia, passed legislation doing the same as part of a bill designed to end all violence against women. But rights groups say this doesn't go far enough. Let's now bring in Lina Abirafeh, who's the director of the Institute for Women's Studies in the Arab World, for analysis on this situation. She joins us from Beirut. Lina, thank you so much for speaking to Middle East Matters. What do you think can be done to abolish the remaining provisions of the controversial law, which essentially makes exceptions for escaping punishment for rape?
Actually, Salam, this is just one piece of a lot of advocacy work and action on behalf of feminist organizations and civil society groups, and most notably the media. So I think we're just at the beginning of our fight in terms of really understanding and unpacking all of the inequalities that exist in the law in Lebanon, not just in a piecemeal way, but more robust.
Now, organizations that support victims of sexual assault say they receive more than 2,500 reports of partner violence every year. Do you think eradicating something like that will be an even bigger challenge?
Well, unfortunately, those things exist all over the world. Eradication is a dream, but next to impossible. We're talking about global statistics that reflect that 1 in 3 women and girls are going to experience this form of violence. Lebanon is no exception. And unfortunately, this is underreported everywhere, and especially here, where systems and services are inadequate and reporting isn't in the culture. So we have a lot of obstacles in order to really eliminate violence against women fully.
Now, this law that we've just discussed, which has been eradicated, is just one factor. How important is it, in your opinion, to work towards changing attitudes in what is a largely patriarchal society in this region, where a family's honour is very much linked to a woman's chastity?
That's absolutely right. That's part of our challenge. This ancient patriarchal system of control where the woman represents the honor of the family, most notably the male member of the family, and as a result, it is within his purview to keep women in line, so to speak, so their behavior doesn't do him any dishonor. The challenge is, when it comes to a marry or rapist law, it could be viewed in a perverse way as a form of protection, because if a girl is raped, and had she been a virgin or not, she's bringing shame to the family, she cannot be married, she might be ostracized. The risk is that they might actually kill her. So in a convoluted way, marrying her protects her and prevents that from happening. Now, this is all part of a system of patriarchy that will take a long time to undo.
And lastly, and very briefly, Lina, looking beyond Lebanon, changes to the rape law have been happening across the region, which I mentioned earlier. What does this mean for women's rights?
Well, in the region, unfortunately, according to the last Global Gender Gap report, we ranked last of all regions in the world. So I think this is just the beginning for us. We don't want a false Arab Spring. What we really seek is equality embedded in all aspects of the law at every level. And then bringing that down to communities and changing attitudes and behaviors and practices is still a long fight. I think we're in it for the long haul, because we have to look at wanting to achieve equality everywhere, or we'll succeed in achieving equality nowhere.
Lina Abirafeh of the Institute of Women's Studies in the Arab World, thank you so much for speaking to us. In Syria, the food crisis deepens. Today, traditional staples like meat are far beyond the reach of ordinary people. But one NGO may have found a way to help the residents of the besieged town of Douma with nutritious alternatives.
In a rundown building near Damascus, these Syrians may have found a solution to meet the population's nutritional needs: growing mushrooms as an alternative to meat. Eastern Ghouta is a rebel-held area besieged by regime forces where food prices have soared.
The first goal is finding a way to replace meat in Eastern Ghouta. It also provides jobs for people. And finally, the idea is to help families learn how to cultivate mushrooms to guarantee their basic nutritional needs.
Mushrooms are relatively rich in proteins, They're cultivated by boiling and pasteurizing straw, which is then planted with barley seeds, colonized by mushroom mycelium. In 3 months, 1 kilogram of barley-planted straw provides 600 to 800 grams of mushrooms.
The blockade that has been imposed on us is very hard. They don't let any supplies into the Ghouta area. Today, 1 kilogram of beef costs about €6, and 1 kilogram of lamb costs €8. People can't afford that. If you have 4 or 5 kids, what can you do?
There's no shortage of vegetables at the market, but the meat is unaffordable to most. So the organization distributes mushrooms to sick and poor residents of the area. Every 3 months they produce 1,300 kilograms of mushrooms, which are distributed to 600 people, who then need to learn to prepare this ingredient, which was largely absent from local recipes.
You're very lucky if you can eat mushrooms. They're rich in proteins. It's as if you're eating a plate of fish or chicken or meat. If you can't afford that, you can eat mushrooms.
Mohammed has learned quickly how to fry, grill and boil mushrooms. Her children had never seen the new ingredient before, but as the siege grinds on, they've become a staple of their diet.
We finish with Gaza, where several hundred people have gone to the cinema for the first time in 3 decades. The event was for one night only, and the film didn't offer any respite from the reality of their daily lives. It was about Palestinians in Israeli prisons. Well, that's it for Middle East Matters this week. Don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook. Do stay tuned to France 24.